My name is TKO and I think that full stack is dead in 2021. Why I'm talking about the full stacks? I think this is connected with the technologies. Today's web applications is built on top of APIs and of course the clients. And the clients could be different. And for mobile application we have a client in the shape of a mobile application. For web applications we have web apps built on top of SPAs, so single page applications. And when you are thinking about the full stack, you are thinking about the one-man army. Right now it's doable, but when you are trying to be on the edge of technologies, on the front end and the back end, you need to cover everything. So this is not only the code that should involve everything around that code. So for a front end, you need to think about your web browsers and the needs that a client has for this project. And another thing is backend. So you need to think about the infrastructure and you need to think about business logic for your application. So this is the separate topics. Of course, currently the front-end application could cover every business logic if you think about it. But the main reason that we are separating the backend and frontend to be more flexible, and you need to think about the future of the applications and APIs, and the backend approach to create the APIs is the most reasonable way to do it. And when you are thinking about monolithic approach, you are trying to build something like in one application you have a front and backend that could be very expensive in the long run. And when you are trying to create something different or create on the top of this solution, you need to create something like a refactors or maybe build a separate application for that. Because you have connected the front end and the back end. The best example for that is a Ruby on Rails with a Rails way. We have coupled the front end and back end. So you're building the templates and you could bind with back end through these templates. So this is okay for building the simpler applications. But when you have a task to do it, the next step of an application, for example, mobile app, you need to create the API. So you double the logic between these templates and running the controllers and running the API. This is not a cost-effective solution. And of course, you could be the best backend and frontend in one person, but I think when you are trying to be on top of every aspect of the application, you need to create something like a compromise. So you will be better on the front-end side or will be better on the backend side. And when you are building application in a proper way, you could be the best expert in the world in that technology. And maybe it's a claim very brave that talking about the full stack is that in 2021, but I need to cover that with opinion through the years. So I started the web development path and around 18 years ago. And when I started that path with web development, I focusing on creation of the backends. So I started with a different language at the time. So that was PHP. And I stick with a PHP because when I trying to build the web application, that was the easiest way to do it at the time. When I tried to create the application, I need to cover the two aspects, the front end, and the front end was templates in HTML. The second level was the logic and the backend. And I need to create a monolith application. That approach is very good for creation of a very easy application. But when I discover something different, like a mobile application, I need a separate logic for APIs. So I create something like abstraction. I need to create a refactor for that. And this is very, very hard. And at the time, I don't have a solution for single-page applications because we are running every web application with a jQuery. So you build HTML with a jQuery or with using of a DHTML. So that was a dynamic HTML. And that was good, but for simple solutions. And I'm thinking about reusing the code and the creation of abstraction for that at the time I'm trying to use the frameworks and the frameworks based on the templates and everything works on a monolith application. But I think you could cover everything in one person. So that was very easy to handle the front end in a jQuery or maybe the plain JavaScript and the backend in a PHP. So that could be on one person. And at the time, that person's called webmasters. And they create the website, they running the application by themselves. That was something like a one-man army at the time. What's the difference between that approach from 18 years ago and right now? I think the main difference is when you are choosing the web technology for using, for example, Ruby, you are stick with Ruby on Rails, for example, as a framework for building applications. And this is okay because you have already made components, you have already made elements, and you could use it, reuse it, and create abstraction for that. But as a developer in 2021, you need to think about the efficiency. So when we are trying to learn something for a backend, you could cover only the main important topics, because when you are jumping from a front end and a back end, you are losing the context, you are losing the focus. So this is okay to be on top of the technologies. This is okay to be front-end developer with a knowledge of the backend, but when we are focusing on the front end or a backend, you need to focus about technologies currently using at that field. So I think this approach assume that you are a web developer. Why you need to be a better developer? I think this is something like a growth. So you need to think about your growth. And when you are choosing the path between the front end and back end, you are create something like a choice in your career. So you need to choose between the front end and the back end in the web development world. So when we are focusing on the front end, for example, you are trying to get the knowledge around the front end development. And you need to think about the views, you need to think about the stores, you need to think about the state of the application, compatibility. So this is much different than the backend. You need to think about the client web browser. So when web browser changes, or maybe something changed in the technology, you need to learn everything new on the technology. So this is the approach on the front-end side. On the back-end side, you need to think about the APIs, the connections, the servers, the infrastructure as a whole, not only the server. And you need to think about the connection to the client and something like uptime for your solution, because when you are thinking about the front end, and you could delegate on the client side, so your application could work offline, and this is okay. So when you are thinking about the APIs, you need to think about the uptime, and I think this is very obvious for backend developers. And this is everything around learning the new stuff and learning the new things in your particular branch of the technologies. So, in my opinion, when you are jumping into the backend, you could learn everything from backend. But of course, this is okay to jumping from after some time to different branch. So you could be a front-end developer, you could jump to the backend, and you could back to the front end, and you learn something new. And this is very, very great, because this is a different approach. You have a different perspective for web development. So this is great to choose between one of them, but also you could create something like environment to change one technology to another. And I'm the best example. So the last 4 years was a front-end career. So I started learning the React and everything connected with React ecosystem and the React Native. And I think this is very similar for each other. And you need to think about front-end mainly. And when I started learning this front-end approaches, I'm thinking about only the front-end side. But I have a knowledge and I have a experience for a backend. So I was a backend developer, but at the time learning of the React, I'm thinking about the application as a front-end, not a backend developer. And this is a very great approach to jump from one to another. I think when you need to choose between the front and the backend, you need to think about it, about the web development as a whole. So the backend could work without the front end, and in the opposite direction, you could use the front end without the backend. But I think when we create the application, you need to thinking about the two separate environments, so the front end and the backend. And as a whole, create the web application. And this is very easy. And you need to think about DevOps. So I think the DevOps is the new way to thinking about the full stack. This is not choosing the right technology at the time. You need to think about the DevOps as a culture. I think the main path to learning something in web development is learning how web works. So this is involve everything connected with web. So the front end, back end, and this is you need to consider everything as a whole. But you need to know how web server works, and this is connected with everything else. When you want to learn something new, the worth to try is to invest in the DevOps. So when you want to learn something new, or maybe if you are the front-end developer, or if you are a back-end developer, you want to find the way to how to learn something new, you need to invest in the DevOps. So I think that the DevOps is an answer for everything, because when you are a front-end developer and you know the DevOps culture and the DevOps approaches, you could grow your knowledge very fast. And I think when you are trying to understand the DevOps, this is the step further. So I think this is very, very important. If you want to dive into DevOps as a culture, you need to think about it as a tool. This is not something like another separate path for the developer. This is additional path. So you could be good front-end developer, you could be good back-end developer, and you add something new, something important, something very, very unique. Understanding of the web servers, understanding of how deployment works. You could implement continuous integration, continuous development, continuous deployment, and this works very, very well if you know the basics. And of course, you need to understand how the web servers works and how infrastructure works. But I think nowadays it's very easy because you have cloud solutions, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and a lot of them. So you could dive into with only 2 clicks. So you could create a virtual machine without the problem. And I think that DevOps is the new full stack. So when you are thinking about creation of the web application, you need to understand the DevOps culture. The last topic, what Monterail do with this? And I think the answer is creation of the Monterail way. So when we thinking about how we do the web application, and in our history, currently we have 11 years, we change approaches very often. So we started as an agency working only with Ruby on Rails. When the web development world changed and the startups and the projects and everything that we think about it, so the web applications change, we need to evolve. So we try to find a niche, and we we're looking for something new for developers because we are not bounded with a Rails way. And I think when you are thinking about the Rails way, we are thinking about the MVC, truly for. We try to find something else, create something like a separation between the front and the backend. We created the APIs for Angular applications, and for the first shot we used the AngularJS. Right now it's a legacy, I know, but in our history it's a great leap for everything. We started from the scratch as an agency using the single page applications with coupling of APIs. So this is the first step. The second step was introducing something else, the view. We started the view. So we use the view as a single page application on the front side, and we're still using the different languages on the backend. And I think this is another great advantage to use the separation. You could be the good developer in the front end, and you could be good developer on the backend. And this is very important to learn everything from your niche. The one approach is choosing the right technology, of course, but another approach in Monterail is thinking about T-shapedness of a developer. Because when we're thinking about growing as a front-end developer, or maybe a back-end developer, or mobile developer as your core, and thinking about additional competences. So you need to focus in your niche, on your work. So you need to focus on your front-end, or back-end, or mobile work, but also you need to think about something like a knowledge between of these technologies. So every developer should think about it. For example, if you are a front-end developer, you need to dive into backend approaches. So you need to talk with your backend developer. Because when you are front-end developer, you have a different language. You need to think about it as something like a bridge between the one developer and another. We started the integration as soon as possible, because this is very important for our quality of work. Another thing is a PGF, and this is a personal growth framework, and we pointing the separate approaches. The one is a soft skills, another is a hard skills. When we are thinking about the PGF, it's a framework for your personal growth. You could learn something new, you could create a path for you, and this is important for you, because you could plan your future with a personal growth framework. So you could choose between the technologies, and you could live with a T-shaped model, and you could be better developer. As I said before, on the beginning of the movie, full stack is dead in 2021. But right now, I think the easiness of choosing the technologies and the easiness of using everything connected with a web application, you could create a web application without the knowledge. So I think the future is no code. So I think this is something like a next step in the evolution of the web development, and everything generated by the computers. So the systems and everything connected with the cloud. I think you could use it as something in addition for your software, and you could delegate the features that you want to create on the already made components. So this is very important. We live in a beautiful world for the developers. We have already made solutions for a cloud, for a front and back end, for everything. So when you are trying to be a better developer, you need to think about the architecture of the development. And this is most important. When you have a knowledge about the architecture, your work will be much easier, and your growth will be very efficient, and you could focus on the most important stuff. And I think the full stack is dead when you are thinking about the complex applications. But of course, when you want to create a POC, or maybe you want to create a small application, you could always use the Ruby on Rails, or maybe very similar framework to create a monolith application and forget about the problems with the infrastructure and everything. So we could create as a one-person, one-man army the fully working application.